How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another Marvel Snap Zone video. My name is Savage Yeti, and for those of you who don't know me, I have my own YouTube channel where I do Marvel Snap stuff, bundle breakdowns, deck tech stuff. So if you like this video, go check that out. But that is not why you are here today. Marvel Snap Zone has asked me to do some weekly videos for you guys, so I'm here, and we are talking about the Conquest meta for this week. So I'm going to go over some of the top decks for you guys this week and kind of how the meta has shifted. And to understand how the meta has shifted, I want to take a quick look at last week's meta tier list. There was only two tiers in this one, tier 1 and 2, but it was led by Thanos Control, Good Card Stature, Evolved Lockdown, and then tier 2 was Sera Control, Iron Patriot, On Reveal Lockjaw, and Hela Tribunal. Now, only 3 of these decks have made it to the list this week, and it's not all 3 tier 1 decks, surprisingly. And so this week, we are led by good cards, not necessarily stature, just kind of good cards in general. I'll go over that and what I mean in a second. And then Thanos Control has dropped to 2nd, followed by Sera Control, which was tier 2 last week and is now tier 1. And High Evo Lockdown is completely off the list. This is for a few reasons. One, Legion is in the game, kind of makes it a little bit difficult. And on top of that, the good cards list, both the stature and just kind of the Legion good cards version, is just a good counter to Lockdown. Lockdown has a tough time either keeping the Storm lane or even just winning the Storm lane. And it's just tough for it to be successful in the current meta right now. And so we're led by those 3 decks, followed by Evolved Lockjaw, Hela Lockjaw, and Big Hands Mirage in tier 2, all 3 of which are new to the list. I actually haven't really seen a Hela Lockjaw list before. I played it a little bit today. It's pretty interesting. It's not my style of play, but it is pretty fun, and I can see why it is so good. Big Hands Mirage obviously is making an appearance this week because Mirage is here this week, followed by Shuri Sauron, which is now on the list. It's at tier 3, so it's not, meta breaking by any means, but it is here on this list because of the fall off of Lockdown. Shuri just really was not good against Lockdown. Can't play on locations. It's hard to stack Shuri and then something else and then play Taskmaster somewhere else. So just wasn't doing very well then. Now it's making an appearance, and followed by Pure Control. We have 2 silent performers. That just means there's not enough data to support them being in the actual tier list, but they are also doing very well for the small amount of games played. That is Thanos Death and of course Bounce. I think we've all seen variations of Bounce and Thanos Death, so I'm not going to go over those 2 decks. You can check out the article in the description and look at those decks if you'd like. Now, before we drill down to these decks, I want you to keep 2 things in mind when I talk about these top tier decks. And the first one is the word flexibility. I'm going to be using that a lot to describe these top decks. And the second one is pay attention to what card packages are in these top decks. It may not be the full card package every time, but you're going to kind of get an idea of what each of these decks does and what makes them so good, specifically in Conquest when you're playing repeated games against specific opponents, or opponents could have decks that counter yours and you just want to have those answers. So let's talk about the first deck, the Good Cards deck. Now, the Good Cards deck that Den uses as his example is a Good Card Stature list. I haven't seen this list so much, but it is out there. I've seen it played a few times. There is a Good Cards list that has been making the appearance. It's included in these stats, and it swaps out a couple card packages. The first one being Polaris and Miles Morales. That gets swapped out for a Killmonger and a Spider-Ham. And then the second package, the Stature Black Bolt package. Black Bolt gets swapped out for Legion, and Stature gets swapped out for Lizard in some of the lists. Specifically this list that Dara played in the recent Conquest tournament. This is the one I've been seeing around a lot lately. You have Killmonger. There's a lot of really good 1-drops in the game, like Sunspot and Nebula. Kitty Pryde has been played a lot as well. Killmonger just takes care of them. Lizard is just good stats for 2. And if you're getting rid of your opponent's cards with, say, Killmonger or Shang-Chi, they're not going to fill up their side of the board, so Lizard is going to get those full stats. It's just a really good deck that is very flexible and lets you change up what you're doing based on what your opponent is doing. You don't commit. It's not a very linear deck where you're committing to specific locations. You can play all over the place, and you can dump a lot of stats on turn 6. Or, as you're going to see is common with a lot of these decks, you have Shang-Chi and Enchantress to get rid of what your opponent has done as well. I did actually make a video on this list if you want to see some gameplay. It's over on my channel, but this is Probably my second favorite Conquest list to use. It's very consistent, again, very flexible. My favorite being Lockdown. I've had to stray away from Lockdown a little bit in this last week because of everything that counters it, but this deck is very good and it's very fun to play. Next up on our list is Thanos Control. It was the #1 on the list last week. It is up there again this week. It's a very good deck. There's not much to be said here. With Time Stone and Psylocke, you have the ability to play them on turn 3, drop a 5-drop on turn 4, another 5-drop on turn 5, and then again, you have the flexibility to decide what you're doing on turn 6. You have Shang-Chi once again to get rid of your opponent's big cards. You have Super Scroll with the prevalence of Darkhawk and decks like this. Super Scroll is also very strong. And then you have the ability to just generate a lot of stats with Double Dino, Blue Marvel. Again, flexibility. You can go tall with Double Dino. You can go wide with Blue Marvel. You have options with this deck. Turn 4, Professor X is the ideal play. You can win a lane with that. Spider-Man on another lane, and you pretty much got the game won from there. I'm not going to linger on this deck for any longer. Again, it's flexible. It's been around for a while. Try the deck out. The next deck we are looking at was tier 2 last week. It is the Sera Control deck. It's been around for a while. The idea of this deck is to give up priority for the entire game, drop Sera on 5, and then on 6, vomit a bunch of cards on the board. Again, because you are dumping a lot of cards on turn 6, this deck is very flexible in what you are trying to do, where you are trying to win. You have the ability to switch it up based on what your opponent is doing. And once again, we have Shang-Chi and Enchantress in the deck, along with Killmonger to get rid of your opponent's stuff and react to what they are doing. The reason why this deck is tier 1 now is because it was very weak against Lockdown. And with Lockdown not doing so well, it's given room for this deck to rise up to tier 1. I've seen some lists that drop Scarlet Witch and play Zabu and then maybe another 4-drop in there. I don't think they're as good as this one. This is my favorite. I don't think it's fully ironed out. I think there could be some changes to it, and there's some spots where you can slot in some things. But again, a very good list, very flexible, and has a reactive card package. From there, we drop down to our tier 2 list, Lockjaw Evo. I'm not a big fan of this deck. It's not my play style, but I do see it a lot. Believe it or not, this deck is actually really hard to pilot. There's a lot of Shang-Chi's in the meta, and I think the temptation with this deck is to pick 2 lanes and go as tall as possible in those lanes. But to one Shang-Chi, you immediately lose the game. So the idea of this deck is, yes, to go big and to get a lot of power on board, but you cannot stack it in 1 or 2 locations. You need to try to read what your opponent is doing, what deck your opponent may have, what counters they may have, and play accordingly. As you can see, as we're getting into the tier 2 decks, it does not have Shang-Chi, it does not have Enchantress, it does not have reactive cards to affect what your opponent is doing. You kind of have your own game plan. This is what you're trying to do. You're trying to react to your opponent by picking which lanes you're going to go into, but you can't really interact with what your opponent is doing. On top of that, compared to the decks that we've already gone over, the flexibility of this deck is much lower than the previous decks. As we're going down the list, you're going to notice a pattern with that. The next deck on the list in tier 2 is Hella Lockjaw. I hate Lockjaw decks. I hate Hella decks. But for whatever reason, you combine the two, it makes one really fun, chaotic deck. I played it all day today. I'm not going to pretend to know how to play it and I can teach you guys, but I did have a blast with it. It is very strong and I can see the potential with this deck. What you're trying to do is use Colleen to discard Swarm, so you have some 0-cost swarms, maybe discard Swarm one more time with Moon Knight or Gambit, but use that Swarm to throw it into the Lockjaw lane so you can get some of these big cost cards out. And you have the ability to throw Gambit, Moon Knight, and Jubilee into the Lockjaw lane, hope to get one of the big cards, destroy one of their cards. One of the problems I found with this deck is because of Lockjaw, you can't control when Hella comes out. And I think I was just getting very unlucky, but I kept discarding just one Swarm and then pulling out Hella. It's still not that bad. You still have a lot of power on board. It's not the worst thing in the world, but obviously you're looking for the high roll where you can discard a Magneto, a Chavez, an Infinite, and try to respawn those with Hella. This deck has the ability to go very tall and very big, just like the last deck, but it is very weak to Shang-Chi once again, and you see Shang-Chi in all of the top decks. Once again, the deck is not as flexible as the previous decks we saw in tier 1, and it does not include a reactive card package. It does have Gambit, where you can try to destroy something, but because of the randomness, you can't really rely on it, and you're kind of just sticking to your game plan and hoping for the best. The last deck in tier 2 is Big Hands Mirage. It is new this week since Mirage just came out this week, but it is very similar to your old Devil Dino deck. Mirage replaced Maria Hill or Sentinel, whatever you were going to play in there. But overall, it's just the standard, you know, Devil Dino, fill up your hands, get random cards, hope to surprise your opponent, get stats on board with Collector and Angela. Nothing really new here. It's very close to just the good cards list that we saw in tier 1. But instead of pumping rocks into your opponent's deck, you're looking to hope to surprise your opponent with something that you get from Coulson or Nick Fury. I think this deck has potential. It has potential to go higher up on this list. There may be some changes that need to be made, but I am a big fan of this deck. I like, one, how flexible it is, and two, it does have that reactive card package with Shang-Chi and Enchantress, and it has Zabu to make those cards cheaper. It's only been around for a week with Mirage. I think some tweaks could be made. Den recommends maybe throwing in a Cosmo in here, America Chavez to make the deck a little bit more consistent. But again, I am a big fan of this deck and I think it has a lot of potential. So let's talk about tier 3. Tier 3 is led by Shuri Sauron. This isn't a new list. You've seen this list before. It's a Shuri list. There's no real big changes here. Shuri was really weak to lockdown decks, and now that those are gone, she has a little bit of space to shine. But again, no reactive card package. You do have Enchantress, but that's more so you can target your own Red Skull or Typhoid. You can also use it as utility against your opponent, but generally it's in here so you can target your own stuff. The gameplay for this deck is very linear. It's not flexible at all. It is a very strong deck because you can go very tall, and if you can get that Shuri Red Skull into Taskmaster, it is a lot of points for your opponent to make up. But again, weak to Shang-Chi and weak to any type of location lockdown. And the last deck we're going to talk about, again, tier 3, is the Pure Control list. I have not given this deck a shot. It does have the Daredevil Professor X combo, Daredevil Spider-Man, you have that option. It has the Angela, you can pump that with Kitty Pryde over and over. Again, reactive cards, Shang-Chi and Enchantress, Jeff and Nightcrawler, so you can activate Miles Morales and hopefully dump a few more things onto the board on turn 6. Overall, it just seems like a relatively weak deck. This is kind of just like a mishmash of multiple deck ideas, and I'm not a huge fan. I could be wrong. Maybe give it a shot, but I don't see this deck having a whole lot of potential. There's just other decks that do what it's trying to do better. And that's the Conquest meta tier list for this week. Shout out to Den for writing this article. He does it every week. It's an amazing article. You need to check out the full article in the link in the description. I went over all the decks, but read his analysis on all of the decks. He has guides on most of the decks, not all of them. Also, go check out my channel if you like this video. Again, I do bundle breakdowns. I do deck videos. I just try to cover all things Marvel Snap. And as usual, if you love all things Marvel Snap, make sure you like and subscribe to Marvel Snap Zone and my channel. I'll see you in the next one.